But if you watch other people, you'll find some people are posers.
Yeah. But it gave me more context. And that's what I like having, is the context.
Well, context is an interesting topic because we've watched a lot of different shows, whether it's YouTube or documentaries, and we pay attention to the details. Now, we don't try to hide any details on our channel. Sometimes we show junk, sometimes we show a mess, sometimes things are cleaned up, sometimes it isn't. But if you watch other people, you'll find some people are posers.
Yeah.
There are people that I have adored watching that have presented themselves to be in a certain environment. And when we watch a long distance view of where they live...
They're saying they live like way out in the countryside, da-da-da-da-da. I can see the houses down the street if I look in the back of that picture.
There's giveaways like, I'm going to run to town to the hardware store. It's a 15-minute drive.
Right.
Or...
if you live in Williams, you might be able to get to the hardware store in Williams in 15 minutes because of the traffic patterns. But if you live out...
well, if you live here, it's at least 45 minutes to get to a hardware store.
Yeah, one way.
And we don't live really out.
No, there's people who live another 12, 15 miles out farther than we do, easy
which
out
is
here.
another 45 minutes of driving.
Yeah, because those are anywhere between 10 and 20 mile an hour roads.
So I don't mind that people say, oh, we live out in the country. Well, to them, country may mean that they're 15 minutes to town, because there's one group that was 15 minutes to town, but there's certain giveaways on channels. It's really important to understand their context. There's another group that we've watched succeed and fail, mostly have successes with some small fails along the way.
Which is the real world.
That's the way it works. But they're tired of doing something, so they take a quick trip to the coffee shop.
Yes. And I'm like, coffee shop.
It's the same thing. You go
I think
to
there's
Williams.
one in Williams. Yeah, there's probably one. There's shops there that you could get coffee at.
Yeah.
I guess there are some coffee shops on the main drag. Yeah, on the main drag near where some of the tourist shops are. There's some coffee shops. We're not big coffee shop fans. I don't drink coffee.
I drink coffee, but
yeah,
I drink it at home.
Yeah.
So
cheaper.
You know, there's things you can learn by watching their context, and I don't hold anything against any of these people who are claiming themselves to be homesteaders. My concern is when they say we're out in the sticks and they're really 15 minutes from town, or we live in the middle of nowhere and there's a constant stream of traffic going by.
Right. They actually have to stop. We've seen a couple people have to stop their videos lately because there was a car driving by, and I'm like...
multiple cars.
Multiple. Yeah, I mean, and then you can see the car in the distance, and the distance is like 50 yards.
So the real important point here is not that they're holding themselves out to live out in the country. It's that they can create a misconception for somebody who's going to move to the country. They say, well, this person lives out in the country, I can do that too. If they can do it, I can do it.
Right.
This person lives in the country. If they can do it, I can do it too.
Right.
One group lives on the East Coast in the middle of a lush area. The other group lives in the southern Arizona desert. Can you do it? Sure, but understand the context.
Right. We have friends out here right now that are going to have to leave because of health issues. They have been told that they need to be within 20 miles of a major hospital that has a trauma center.
Well, that's if you want to continue living, and some people that's important for.
Right, and others are fatalistic
important.
And they say, I don't care. But you know, even a helicopter is not going to get you to the trauma center in 20 minutes here.
So let's talk more about posers.
Right.
There are some large channels that say, I moved out here with no skills whatsoever. Well, when you listen to the channel long enough, you find out that, oh, well, they operated heavy equipment, that they did earthworks, that they did...
Maybe it wasn't
this kind
their
of work.
equipment, but it was somebody else's farm. They worked on it when they were a kid.
So they worked alongside with Amish or Mennonite carpenters to learn some skills. That's all well and
I mean,
good.
I envy them. I really envy their ability to work. We have friends who have hired Amish to renovate their homes and stuff like that. Not in this part of the United States, but in other parts of the United States. And I envy the bejesus out of them because, as they said, when they say they'll be there on Tuesday, they'll be there on Tuesday.
This Tuesday, not next Tuesday.
Not some other random Tuesday somewhere down the calendar. When they say they'll be there at 8 o'clock, unless there's a disaster of some sort, they will be there at 8 o'clock. When they give you a price, they will hit that price.
That's the price.
And the only thing that will change, obviously supplies change, especially in our current wacky supply chain thing. But to be able to deal with people who take their work that seriously is awesome. It can create, when you're watching this, especially if you're a newbie and you're trying to figure things out, you're sitting there and going, what am I doing wrong? I can't seem to get this much work done. I can't do that. And there was one group on the East Coast that we were watching that were like, wow, they're getting so much done. And I'm like, who's that working in the garden?
Well, that's when I was talking about posers, there are posers out there.
Oh, big time.
And some of the bigger channels
Are serious posers.
have a lot of posing that goes on.
Now, Jason at Cog Hill has been right up front about the fact that he is not running the heavy equipment, that they have hired people to build their pond, to clear things, to regrade. They considered building a house, but they had done it before and they did not enjoy it. And they're a little older now, and they wanted to get into it and get it done. So they hired professional contractors to do all the work. I have zero problem with that.
Now, when you look at Homesteading, he's great now. He says, I have this...
He's grown up a lot.
He has a set of skills that he gained working for his parents. His parents own an earthworks company.
Right. I think they do professional pond building and landscaping and stuff now.
Yeah. So he operated some of the heavy equipment in trying to convert their raw piece of land now into a place where they could live.
But he was very upfront about having to learn new stuff because the different types of equipment work differently. When you watch somebody operate the big equipment that comes out and you've got to be extending the arm and then grabbing stuff and this, that's a whole nother can of worms than doing the kind of stuff I've done before, to be honest.
So it's just another skill. But the nice thing about what they're showing now is they're showing
the
some practical realities of building a new homestead.
And he's working his butt off out there, and he goes, "It's broken." and it broke, and he had to get a mechanic out. Thank God he lives, even though they're in the country, you can actually get mechanics to come out, especially heavy equipment mechanics. And the heavy equipment mechanic came out, figured out what was wrong. They got replacement parts. They fixed it. You know, good luck getting somebody to come out here.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I've had to go fix a piece of equipment because it broke and I need it to do a specific job. For many years, we dug every trench out here by hand through caliche, which is really hard. We could soften it with water, but the cost of the water to soften that much caliche was out of the budget.
You need a pickaxe, you need a mattock, because a mattock has a broader blade on it. You need a couple of different sizes of shovels that are pointy, not the flat-bladed ones. Flat-bladed ones are only good for scraping flat stuff. You need a breaker bar, which is a single piece of iron that's heavy and that has a sharp end on it that you can use to break rocks, and you can also use it as a pry bar. And you need some Bengay, because when you're done, you're going to be worn out.
So we've watched a lot of these channels, and there are a lot of homesteaders who are, let's just call them sickly. And the idea that they're going to go create a brand new homestead out of raw land in 100 days is an interesting proposition, but they by themselves, without multiple other people to assist, without the kind of equipment necessary to do the logging and to do the forming of the land, is not a likely scenario for individuals who have not really done this before. It takes a lot longer than you think. We've watched Al Lumna for Lumna Acres for many years, since well before his channel blew up and became large.
Yeah.
And he just finished installing a commercial 2-sink workstation out of stainless steel. And his comment was, you know, this started off to be a 2-hour install, and so far it's been 3 days. And you know, that's what you need to be prepared when you're building a new homestead.
Right.
It's one thing to buy land that you have to do a little bit of work on.
Right. Say you buy an existing farm. We looked at one the other day where somebody had bought an Amish farm. The house was fine. The land was in good shape. What he needed to do was, quote unquote, modernize it, because he didn't like the fact that there was no electricity and plumbing in that house. And it depends on which Amish group you deal with as to whether there would be plumbing in there or not. Some groups do not allow plumbing in their homes, others do. But he had a large structure to start with. He had a barn, he had a house. It was all livable. It didn't meet their standards. And Amish houses are designed to be lit without the need for lighting.
Well, right now today, the spoiled footage that I couldn't use for yesterday's show,
right,
we ran a lot of lights.
Right.
Right now we're using absolutely no supplemental lighting because we have south-facing windows. It's a large amount of glass. We get a lot of sunlight coming into the house.
And heat, which is, but not during the summer, because we oriented our house specifically to take advantage of light coming into the building during this winter when the sun is low in the sky, and it lights the house well, and it gives heat. In the summertime, the sun is higher. We do not get as much heat, although we still have insulated drapes on the south side so that we can open and close those to not broil ourselves. But we also have windows on the north side so we can get light because it's still super bright outside. Things like that make a huge difference.
So let's talk, finishing up talking about homesteading, homesteading and posers. Homesteading has a goal. It's not a committed plan. By committed plan, I mean something that they must get completed. But they have a goal of getting their new place habitable in 1 year.
Right.
Now, can they do it with the right kind of equipment? Probably.
Yeah, they're
Maybe.
facing the problem of how are they going to afford a house. And actually, we didn't get a chance to watch that one video they did the other day on how much a house costs. You know, your basic house to build it is like $350,000 in most places.
Well, at least, you know, the average home to build in the U.S. is about $250 per square foot. And we have 2,200 square feet here, so you calculate that and say, well, to rebuild this house would be in excess of $600,000. We built this house for less than $50 a square foot, way less than $50 a square foot, because we put in 90% of the labor ourselves.
Right. We did hire specialists for a couple of things. We got somebody to do our tile work. I can do tile work. It's just that this was stone tile, which I had never done, and we decided we'd hire somebody for that. Am I thrilled with the work they did? No, I'm not. But I'm not going to change it because it's there and it's functional.
And it actually looks okay.
Yeah, it looks okay. There's some issues. We'll have to deal with that eventually. It goes back to the problem we've mentioned before of can you get good quality contractors where you live or where you want to build. Several of the people we've watched have friends, neighbors, who can come over with equipment. Some of the people are for rent. We've got a neighbor who's for rent, who does a great job. He's older than we are. Still son calling me honey drives me crazy. But I'm like, I'm Mrs. Davis, darn it. No.
Or Irene.
Or Irene, yeah. I prefer you just call me by my first name. But I just had to, you have to just kind of ignore it sometimes when you get the old timers.
Old timers, we're not all that young anymore.
He's older than we are by almost 10 years, and he's old style, old school, as my daughter would call it. So you just have to accept that in some parts of the United States. I just hadn't been called honey for probably 30 years when we moved out here, and I was like, seriously, dude? I'm not your bartender, He is really competent. If we were to say we need a pad poured, do the work, and pour a pad for us, it would be done. It would be done correctly. The cement would be handled correctly. The rebar would be handled correctly. You could count on it. It's not always the case, you know?
In the case of building this place and our utility building and every other building that's here on the property, I formed the rebar. I participated in placing the cement, the concrete. Unfortunately, the foundation for this house had to be poured in 2 sections because we had rain and rain and rain and rain.
So they poured the first section, and it took like another several months before they could pour the second section.
So there's a lot of things that are going to go on. Now let's talk a little bit more about how can you determine when somebody's a poser on YouTube. Well, one thing is watch their cinematic long distance shots.
Yeah, a lot of times that's a total giveaway, and that's what we spotted a really long time ago, before some of these people finally were forced by being outed by other channels to admit that they were using hired help. Having staff, okay, you got a family with a bunch of kids. They have a nanny.
A nanny?
Yeah, I never had a nanny. It was you and me raising our kids, and we tried to be able to afford once a week to go out and hire a babysitter. Couldn't always afford it every week. Okay, so we raised our own kids.
You'll see in a lot of these channels B-roll. That's the material that they kind of use as
Fillers?
Fillers, but
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
You'll see in B-roll a brief instant where you'll see an adult working off in a field, or an adult working...
And you're like, that's not a family member. Who is that?
Or you'll see an adult felling a tree.
Right, and you find out it's the farm manager, and oh, he's got staff and everything. Well, if you have staff, you can move the world with staff.
That's kind of the extreme for posers on YouTube homesteading channels.
Right.
The other less extreme version is the people who really do live close to town, do live close to services. It's not that I envy them, well, I kind of do, but it's not that I find fault with them living close to town.
No, just don't lie about it.
Yeah, and when people say, I'm going to live off-grid, most people who have access to power, to grid power, are going to eventually
Hook up.
Succumb to connecting to that grid because it's more convenient, it's less hassle, but more importantly...
You can't get a bank loan in many parts of the United States if you're not on grid.
So some of these channels that start off saying, oh, we're going to be off grid, they figured out they couldn't finance their property, so they dug a line over the hill to a near power pole and did a deal with their neighbor so they could hook to the power pole.
Right.
Or they decided to connect to the power pole that was on the base of their property.
Right.
Or all manner of reasons to connect.
You find out that the contractors don't even want to work for you because, what do you mean I have to bring a generator and gasoline in order to run power tools?